Hi everyone, it's Nadia and Jake. The doggies want to keep playing downstairs today. So today we're going to review something that's actually on Netflix.
The number one movie on Netflix.
Yeah. And we heard there's a buzz about this, so we wanted to kind of see what it was about.
A buzz? I mean, it was...
I don't look at reviews, usually. You do.
Yes,
You told me there was a lot of talk about this.
I thought it might be interesting because sometimes I like to see, we don't want to always see great movies. So I was kind of interested to see, okay, why is this movie getting such bad reviews? It's in like the 1 stars on Letterboxd, but it's number 1 on Netflix. So like, how does this keep happening that such poorly reviewed movies are so widely seen? So let's try to answer that question today by talking about the movie
Uglies.
Yes. So we're talking about Uglies starring Joey King, and we have some thoughts, right?
We have lots of thoughts.
All right, so tell me, what did you love about this movie? What is so great about it? Because you were raving. So tell me, what was so amazing about this movie?
Exaggerate, by the way.
Oh, you loved it. Come on, tell me, what did you love about it?
It was just like unintentionally funny.
What?
I have to get into spoiler section to talk about like everything, so I will just keep it high level. There were some scenes. Generally, as you could see from the trailer, there's like people who are the uglies, and then everyone gets plastic surgery when they're sweet 16, I think, and then they turn pretty. And so the movie is literally about like how prettiness saves the world in a lot of ways. It takes away division and a fraction between people.
That's where the main issue, I think, in the movie starts, in the prologue, where they're just explaining the world. I get that this is based on a YA series, but it's just the most ridiculous but also generic world building I've ever seen in a movie, or at least in a long time.
I thought the world building was fine. I didn't have an issue with that as much as...
It made no sense.
I mean, the premise of it, no, the explanation of it, but I'm sorry. When you said world building, I was thinking in my head, like setting wise.
Oh, the
sets are fine, I thought.
The sets are plastic CGI, but...
I thought, I'm so sorry. But yes, the world building in itself, there's...
like the concepts.
There is a lot of logic missing there. I can look past it for most times because, with fantasy, you always have some questions here and there. But what was really unintentionally funny was the script and the scenes where there's revelation of people being elevated into the ugly to pretty personality, I suppose. There's a lot of things that was just like so bad in the way that it was presented that it became funny. Joey King is not ugly.
Well, first, none of the uglies are ugly.
I mean, no one. It's beauty is in the beholder of the eye. Beauty is in the eye of the. How does it go?
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Thank you.
Here's the thing, and this we'll talk about in the spoiler discussion. But from my understanding, based on a few of the reviews I've seen, is that it's an adaptation of a YA series, Uglies, beloved, much read. From my understanding, there was an adaptational choice that kind of went against the whole premise of the original series and what the twist was because it's in a visual medium. So we'll get into that in the spoilers, but let's focus first on the premise and the characters, the dialogue. There's a lot going on here, even though it is a very simple, definitely too simple YA dystopian story. It erases all nuance or complexity. It's very basic. It's all the kids, when they turn 16, they go under this surgery where they become beautiful. And we're told in the prologue, this basically creates world peace. All conflict is gone because there's no differences between people's physical appearances. Now,
wait, hold on. With that being said, there is diversity of color. And
that's
gender,
okay, but that's what I mean, because that immediately I was like, red flag. This sounds like some crazy fascist stuff, like modern day fascists wanting everyone to be the same and thinking the only reason there's no social harmony is because everyone doesn't look the same. Now, yes, in this movie, there's diversity of race, the premise itself suggesting that is so weird. And the fact that it's not challenged within the text of the film, because I was expecting there to be like, all right, what's the real deal? Like, we do get a sense of what's actually going on. It's not just the surgery that makes you pretty. There's other stuff. But it wasn't enough to explain how is there so much peace and harmony. Like how are people buying into this? And basically, it's just such a simplistic thing that isn't challenged and so empty that it's like, it's so hard to just buy into anything in the whole movie.
Well, also, it's interesting because, the premise of it, and also in the movie in itself, you can change your features in your face, your eye color, whatever else. What the movie doesn't cover is, what if you wanted to change your race? What if you wanted to do that? That's where it gets like even more problematic, right? And it never kind of tackles that issue. Not that I expect it to, but it's just interesting how much of a slippery slope prettiness, quote unquote, is in the movie. Creating world peace by making yourself look whatever way you want. But then there's that sense of not being accepted and being an outcast. So I guess with that one itself is a dystopian ideal that the movie is trying to look at and allude without truly going into the depth of it. I mean, I want to premise this by saying I've never read the novel. I don't know what happens in the novel, so maybe the novel is completely different. But the premise of it does seem flawed just with the general idea of things. And I thought it would be more interesting and make it more complex and nuanced if they were to dive deeper into more complex issues when it comes to like being able to change everything that you can or want appearance-wise. Also, there's a lot of, and I'll talk about this more deeply in the spoiler section, but your personality changes as well as when you're pretty. And at first we don't understand if it's because you are pretty now and you're like,
it's so obvious of a twist.
Yeah, but that's kind of what it's alluding to. Oh, they're just like, you're ugly right now. You'll understand when you're pretty. And when people who become pretty, quote unquote, they have the attitude like, B word, I'm too good for you now, And then you get more of a revelation of what that really means. I did like the world building some aspect of it. So I like the idea of people living in the city, as well as dissatisfaction in the city life, as well as exploring what the nature life looks like. However, it just doesn't make sense what they're doing to nature. There's a lot of flaws there, and sometimes it does seem like the creator, the writers, they kind of choose to do a simplistic route. They don't want to do something more nuanced, more complex, but because they don't know how to. So it almost gives me the judgment that they're not like dedicating or caring about the material. Or the world as much as they should, because there is potential, like I said, of more commentary, but also more of a world building, making it more complex, making it more diverse.
And the hierarchy is basically just one Laverne Cox being in charge, who's just scared. Like that's it. Like, we have no concept of how anything works, even in a very shallow way. There's just nothing.
Well, you just have to go along with it. And I will say, again, without reading the book, can see how it works as a novel, especially a YA novel. Yeah. I can definitely see it. I can see myself reading this novel when I was a teenager, and I can actually see the author's vision why this is the way it is, especially if it's a series.
Well, exactly, and I think in a movie, you have to see everything. It has to have a sense of reality in terms of the sense of the design and how things work. You got to get more of that wider picture, whereas in a book, it can all be super subjective. If you're talking just from one 16-year-old's perspective,
yeah, exactly.
Then it can feel like tunnel vision. They're in this world, so they're not noticing things that are just normal to them. Different medium entirely. I do want to talk briefly about the really, really bad CGI in this, especially in a few 2007 style skateboard sequences, because they have these metal skateboards that they spend way too much time hanging out on. I also, and I'll give you time to respond to all of the points in this. But I also want to mention that this feels like a throwback to the YA dystopian era, but without any of the knowledge of its predecessors, without any of the kind of where they aren't doing anything new. They're just sticking to an old formula without interesting aspects. It's just really stripped back. We've seen all this before. That we know we've seen Hunger Games and Divergent, Maze Runner, all this stuff.
I haven't seen that. I've only seen the first.
But you're very familiar because it was so saturated for many years.
I've only seen the first Hunger Game.
All right.
And then the.
But I mean, in terms of
that's the only
TV,
one.
in terms of books, it's just the concepts are out there. People are aware of it. That's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So that this is nothing new or exciting.
Yeah, but I think that's why they're doing it though, because it's
and maybe
a lot
that's
of
why
times
it's popular.
Yeah, a lot of times like this is the formula that works. It just seems like it's a half-ass. I would give it a 4 out of 10.
Right.
Okay. And the only reason I give it 4 is because it was unintentionally funny.
And I think the half-ass is kind of the Netflix model in a lot of ways. Like, it's enough to feel like a real movie, but not quite. And I think that's why people are watching it, and people are watching it probably to its entirely because it is number one, so that means people are putting a lot of time into this, and because it feels sort of like one of those older movies. It has a familiarity. It pulls you. It's entertaining enough to watch. It's definitely not unwatchable. There's a couple boring scenes, but it is so full of cliches. It's so full of the typical beats in these stories that it's just super easy to just sit there and let it run. I'd give it a 3 out of 10.
Yeah. I would say like watch it if you want to just laugh and you aren't like.
There's some very funny moments.
Yeah, I mean it's a type of movie that you can text while watching. I don't know, take with that what you want to take with that.
Shall we get into spoilers?
We shall.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead.
We've got to talk about personality, right? Because one thing that it tries to make suspenseful is that when a person changes their looks and goes into this plastic surgery, they're not only changing their physical appearance, it also does something in their personality, changes them personality wise. It's just more so brainwashing. It's common for a lot of sci-fi novels, especially YA novels, so it makes sense. I myself have written stories like that. It's interesting how you don't really understand, like there's one woman who talks about what being pretty means. She's like the leader of the pack. You know, usually is wearing a white dress, very sophisticated, and she's like, you guys are going to be pretty tomorrow. Congratulations. And she's the dictator. But this is part of the world building that's missing. Is it just her?
Yeah.
We know that there are scientists who are David's parents who kind of go into the wild and they have their baby naturally and raise them naturally, which is uncommon in the city life because they kind of, all the uglies, quote unquote, go into this dorm-like building, get to school, and then their parents can find them in the pretty world after they've turned pretty. However, what is this world alluding to? How is she able to kind of it just seems like one person dictated everyone without the team, and she just brainwashed everyone. And we also don't see any more scientists, really, too many. Like maybe like some extras who are functioning as some scientists, but we don't really understand how the world is as controlled as it came to be. When they go into the wild and capture all these people who escaped the city life at the end to forcibly turn them pretty, they're being held at a prison by people who were super brainwashed, pretty people who are super brainwashed. Again, one person controlling the functions of all these people, like, seems so incomplete.
It feels very small. The world feels very small.
But at the same time, it's supposed to be big. I think when they go into the wild, they're using fire as a tool. For me, there was a disconnection between like what the fire represents, because then you're like, okay, they're trying to burn all these flowers. That's near the city life. But then they're also using fire at the forest, and they're burning down all the wildlife there, and they're causing havoc. So it's like, what does really nature represent to them? Are they just like trying to basically say F nature, but at the same time they're using tools and going back into like the 1900s and like there's nostalgia about this life, that life, but then at the same time they're destroying their habitat? That's what I mean. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Like the idea of the city people being brainwashed, I can get with that. The idea of people escaping to the wild, getting their freedom, having their own thing to say, I can get with that. It's the in-between those logic that has so many holes that I can't get with. And it seems so fixable that it just seems lazy on the studio and the writer's part for them to not go a little bit more deeper into those concepts. When Joey King's characters, first of all, I think it's crazy the fact that she wants to be called Squint because this is like unintentionally funny part where, excuse me, she goes, call me Squint. And then there's a flashback memory of me like, you just have squinty eyes. And it's like, call me Squint. Like, call me Nose. And then also Paris is like literally throwing and destroying her iPad thing. Yeah. She wasn't doing anything. And it's made to be sentimental. Like he cut himself and she cut herself. I'm like, he literally destroyed your property because he wasn't patient enough. I would say that's a red flag and not a friendship flag, but whatever. Also unintentionally funny, now mentioning it. Sorry, I just want to get this through. When she gets forcibly turned pretty. I hate to say this, but a lot of times in our social media and everything, there's a beauty standard these days, you know, where you're supposed to look like this, you're supposed to have a boob job, you're supposed to have a great butt, you're supposed to have curves all in the right places and no fat in all the wrong places and blah, 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 blah. So it's basically they're all getting like plastic surgeon to look like that. And I would say like, I don't want to speak more about it because then it'll go into a bigger subject, but it's like the way they presented her. She's like, you show her butt and she has like a butt job and then it's like she's turning and she's like, what? Hey, it's just it was just done so cringy.
It was loud. It was very silly.
It was very silly that it was just so funny. I actually enjoyed it, but I don't think I was supposed to. Like, I mean, yeah, it was, yeah. And so there are a lot of moments like that. Paris, one of the scenes, he basically manipulates Joey King, the main character, into revealing where Shay is and how to get there and gets a tracker or whatever. And then when Paris goes into the leader and says, you know, I just felt different. I felt like a little bit of myself again or whatever. Well, it's just interesting because they met in the rooftop not too long before that, and then he didn't feel any of those feelings. So why are those feelings happening then but they didn't happen before? So that's also a logic flaw. Another one is at the very end of the film, Joey King turns pretty because she wants to volunteer herself as an experiment. And she tells David, like, hey, I will not lose myself. I know who I am now. So don't worry. I'll give you a sign. She has a cut on her finger, on her palm of her hands. She keeps that. I just think it's like interesting how they're not able to catch that she doesn't want to fix that flaw. And so the machines are smart. The machine is smart, but they're also dumb because it's very easy to trick it. They can take off the ring and put it somewhere. Like there's a scene where it shows that it can reveal bodily functions and also like heartbeat and all those things. But it's interesting how the scene with her and Shay, they put it on a branch, but then Shay goes, it'll just think we're having a picnic. It's not like detecting your heart rate all the time, even though it is supposed to.
That was just another of the many very dumb like sci-fi stuff.
I can get with that, but there's usually an explanation of like a deeper explanation of why they're able to fool them, but it just seems like anyone is able to fool it. So it just seems like there's a lot of troubleshooting that needs to happen with the devices in itself. And is it because they're low budget and there's one person controlling the world? Like, I don't understand how something can be so smart in that it can not only maneuver and change and manipulate physical but also personality changes at the same time, can be so flawed as to not detect a human bodily function that it's meant to monitor. Why aren't more people? You see that they want to rebel. It's not like a brainwashing thing. They only get brainwashed after they turn pretty. So why aren't they rebelling from the start a lot more? Then I guess it alludes to the idea that they're not rebelling from the start because everyone wants to be pretty. They're fine with being brainwashed as long as they turn pretty. And I guess that's a social commentary. So that was a little bit of a ramble of spoilers. But that's what I have to say. What do you think?
All right. Well, I only have two things to say. The first is that I really thought that Joey King and Shay, her friend Shay, Squint and Shay, I thought that they had like a lesbian romance. I thought that they were going to be together.
Oh, yeah.
Because she had no chemistry with any of the guys, and they were so boring to watch. Like, when she was with David, like, it was just boring. Whereas with Shay, they had some, like, actual affection and care for each other. They had
the most affection, probably.
So, I don't know if the actors were trying to push for that a little bit or trying to have that as a subtext in the scene, but it really came across to me that way, and I was disappointed that they didn't do anything with that. This movie is based on a book, a YA book, and I was reading in some reviews something that really unlocks the problem of this movie for me. So apparently one of the big twists in the Uglies series, I don't know if it was in the first book or whatever, but one of the twists is that the Uglies just look like normal people, and the Pretties actually look like creepy, weirdly formed creatures.
Like almost doll, very plastic.
No. They don't look pretty. I'm saying they look like monsters.
Oh, in the book?
In the book.
Oh, wow, okay.
But that's the thing. That's an adaptational change. And you guys have to see. I don't know if this is true. I haven't read the book, but this is just from reviews I've seen. In the book, it's kind of like a big moment because when you're reading the book, in the character's perspective, that's what pretty is because that's what they tell them it is, right? So that's kind of like a cool twist because in a book, you can't actually see you're just hearing from words, But in a movie, it would be very different, and it raises the question, how different would this movie be if they looked like monsters, but they treated them like they were so beautiful?
That's a much more interesting idea than what I saw in the film. Especially the fact that Joey King's character kind of can go to the pretty and she sees how they're like. But not only that, the leader in itself is a hologram, and then she's pretty, and they can see what a representation of prettiness looks like just through her in itself. Mm-hmm. That's actually a lot more interesting than what I saw.
Let's wrap up. Thank you for watching, everyone. Let us know if you saw this film, this masterpiece, and we will talk to you all soon.
All right, talk to you. Bye.
Bye.